Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat, where we examine the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Hodes. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. I'm writing a book. It's my first nonfiction work, and it's 3 stories braided into one. It got me thinking of other stories, world-famous ones, that have their own interesting backstories. I promise to explain. Let's get into it. If you've been with me since the early days of The Curious Cat, first, thank you. In the days, weeks, weak moments when I catch myself wondering if this podcast is worth the effort, it's you that keeps me going, keeps me listening to my guides and creating episodes. But second, you know about the passing of my other father, Mike, a little over a year ago. Yeah, 2 fathers, both kidney failure, double tragedies. Mike was my mother's partner of somewhere close to 50 years. In the days after he passed, and actually come to think of it, I need to correct myself. In the hours after he passed, my mother asked me if I could please write her obituary. Yeah, you didn't mishear that. Hers. My niece Ceri was pulling together Mike's, which she was kind enough to send out for input to some of the family. Mike's obit was in great hands. Mom, though, felt like her obituary was a loose end. It needed to be drafted in the days to come to help her be at peace. The best I could tell, she had a mental checklist of items that needed to be planned for and resolved before her exit ramp loomed large. We were both still emotionally bruised from Mike's passing, but her request was flattering. She said I'm her favorite writer, which is why she was hiring me. I hadn't processed Mike's death, and even thinking of my mother's hurt, I nodded yes and then made a quick escape to the bathroom to cry in silence. And then I kind of dabbed my eyes and got my crap together and went back out. I tasked my mother with sending me her resume, mostly to deflect my part of the work for a little bit, even a couple days. She was glad to have something to do and made a note. That's how the idea of a book began, drafting an obituary. It was as much about my mother's life, which I was soon to realize I'd only grasped from the limited viewpoint of being her daughter. But it would take a year and a half of real conversations, questions, answers to widen my perspective into something that could grasp that my mother had been a baby once, then a kid with her own dreams, then a teenager who'd had those dreams squashed by adults. She'd been a young woman whose worst misstep was to believe for a moment in true love ever after, and become a strong feminist woman at the end of that fire, who used her experiences to serve as a guidepost to all that she would encounter in her life as a mother, a grandmother, and an educator. This process of learning who my mother really is, and where she came from, her battles, her losses, her victories, her travels, her passions and heritage would lead the relationship between us to be transformed. So her obit, it was as much about resolving ancestral wounds as it was about writing concise paragraphs that accurately encapsulated who Suzanne is. My mom traveled to Denver, where I'd only recently relocated twice before the new year. Each trip was filled with museum visits, sporting events, conversations, walks, debates, tears, laughs, and a deeper appreciation. We had a moment before I drove her to the airport after Christmas when I caught a head-on look at the cruel jibes she'd endured by her mother that no doubt loved her, but had her own hurts and disappointments in life that led to those moments. And I saw my mother as someone I wish I'd been friends with back then. I'd have stuck my tongue out and told her mother what she said was rude and mean. I'd have linked elbows with my mother/friend, and I would have marched her down to Russell's for a barbecue pork sandwich. Those visits made me want to see my mother's hometown, Chicago, through her eyes. I wanted to walk with her into those places of her past where she went to school, she met up with friends, she went to church, said her ill-fated wedding vows. I wanted to know her stories. And so I asked her if we could go to Chicago together. Finding dates that lined up with her schedule and mine was daunting, but we managed it, landing on a week in late August. When I tell people my mother is 81, they are shocked. She's physically fit, she's sharp-minded and energetic. Her age meant she no longer had to take off her shoes for TSA, for example, but they never volunteered that privilege unless we made a point to tell them. We swear she's 81. No, really. As we settled into our seats for the quick 2.5-hour flight from Denver to O'Hare, I asked her, when's the last time we were on a plane together? We were both stumped. We'd gone on trips together, Hawaii, Florida, that kind of thing, but we'd always traveled separately, leaving from different cities. And in junior high and high school, when I was in those grades, all of our trips together had been in the car, down to California to see Garth during his spring break from college, across the mountains to Seattle for a King Tut exhibit or a Sonics game, over to Ellensburg for Girls' State, to UW to move me into the dorms. And when I had my own family, it made sense to meet she and Mike places. The last flight I could think of that we'd been on together was to Chicago and back on spring break when I was just a kid. We'd had to eat maybe 20 boxes of Chex cereal. We had to send in the proofs of purchase on the back and then use the flight vouchers that we got from doing that to afford that trip. We landed in Chicago this time around and went in search of the driver my mother had arranged to pick us up and take us to downtown. Yes, she Ubers, of course, but she was anxious to do this from the airport because of the frenetic pace of O'Hare. It took a few calls and a bit of navigation to pair up with our driver, but we did it. Though it was Saturday, we learned that Chicago traffic is always jammed. A 45-minute journey, the driver informed us, would take closer to an hour and a half today. Mom and I sat back in our seats, and as the city scrolled past the windows, she remembered Chicago out loud. On that drive to our downtown hotel, my mother told me about growing up in Chicago. Her father gave her a quarter, and that's all she needed. Off she'd go catching a bus into the city center, asking for a transfer from a driver, which is a slip of paper that was like a golden ticket and allowed her to jump from bus to bus to bus until it was time to return home. Sometimes they'd hang out at the beach, which is what she called the shores of Lake Michigan. Other times they go to the great big central Chicago library, peruse stacks of books, leaf through them, and also look at the magazines until their rumbling stomachs reminded them to eat. They went to museums, parks, the zoo, and when it was lunchtime, a pizza place. The only rule they had to adhere to was be home by dark. Otherwise, the city was theirs to enjoy. Times are different now, so is the city of Chicago. But in spite of playing host to the Democratic National Convention that had wrapped up just 2 days prior to our visit, or maybe because of it, Chicago sparkled. The people, like the city, were beautiful and fashionable, making me wish I'd packed heels and a dress with me. I wanted to be gorgeous and cool like the people at the front desk, behind the Uber steering wheel, working at the Field Museum. I vowed to wake up early enough the next day so I could have time to put on makeup. Our days in the city were chock full. We went to museums and restaurants, but a highlight for me was watching the Chicago White Sox play at the site of the old Comiskey Park, which is now rebuilt, and they call it something like guaranteed rate or something like that. We arrived for the daytime game against the Detroit Tigers, and after taking pictures of strangers in front of Comiskey's original home plate, which I hope to God I didn't mess up, a wonderful guy came and asked if we wanted him to take our picture. And it was the most beautiful picture of all. We walked the entire park, Mom and I, all the levels. We stopped for more photos at the bronze statues of two of my mother's favorite players, Louis Aparicio and Nellie Fox. The statues were positioned in a way that made the two seem like they were playing a game of eternal catch. I asked my mom to move near Nellie Fox to catch Louis's next throw. I love that picture. It's on my phone and etched on my heart for the long haul. Mom said that the White Sox games were special because it was a connection to her father. On Sundays, she, her father Vincent, and Aunt Bern would always come here if the White Sox were in town, of course. It was something they all loved, and my mother's mother, Catherine, did not. My mother also shared that her father had actually dated Aunt Bern or Bernadette before meeting Catherine. I'm beginning to see the connections from Vincent to the Feeney women, which I believe came through one of his first jobs when he moved to Chicago in search of his father. He was delivering baked goods and collecting money from those businesses during the Depression. The job was risky because people were starved for food, for money, and for opportunity. So Vincent had to carry a gun begrudgingly. He and Aunt Bern struck up a friendship, but once he met Catherine, he fell head over heels. The three of them were the best of friends, and with Catherine, their marriage was death till they part. Back at Comiskey, though, with Mom, it was August 25th. It was Mike's birthday, and because of that, I brought his baseball cap along so I'd feel like he was part of our fun. I hadn't realized the day would be a scorcher, though. Our prime seats were in full sun, so Mike's hat came in handy. The people in the seats behind us were well on their way to drunkenness before the opening pitch, but that just added to our experience. We toasted Mike and settled into those first innings full of hope that we'd see a rare White Sox win. Our hot dogs were the best I've ever had at any ballpark in America. They were perfection, Chicago style with no damn ketchup. They were done right. Seated on the 200 level behind home plate near the press boxes, a foul ball zipped past our faces and slammed against the back wall. When the usher showed up with an ice pack a few minutes later, he asked, "Who needs this?" And everybody pointed to the white mark left on the green facade. On the Uber back to the hotel afterwards, the driver took us on the Lakeshore route. We drove past the Art Institute of Chicago, where my mother-in-law Betty had attended. Mom said, "That's where your grandma dreamed of going to school." She loved art, but the priest told her no, said she was supposed to get married and have kids, not get a college education. So that's what she did. I'd heard the story before and knew we'd healed this part of our family's history because the proof of it was that both my daughters are pursuing careers in professional art, though in different ways, and both were finding the magic of joining engineering, electronic or computer engineering with those designs and the end products they were making, because that's how their brains work. And I was finding out it wasn't just the Hote side, my husband's family, that could take credit for their abilities. No, this was from my side of the family too. The art, the engineering, the grit to come up with their own way of thriving that spit in the face of convention. As I tugged out these stories from the past, I gained clarity on my immediate past and the present as well. The connections, threads from then to now, became crystal clear. Quite frankly, it is causing me to rethink what fate is and destiny. The universe has clearly been conspiring with our ancestors to bring about aspects of our lives. Sometimes the fingerprints are names and places that serve as a wink. Other times it's a quirk or a natural talent that I found out was hardwired into the family DNA centuries ago. What's been blowing my mind, and that's saying something considering it's been less than a year since I had my Heal the Inner Child session with my precious friend Monique Pliakis, is that when I turn the spotlight on my mother and she knows she's being seen, she shares the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we are healing the past because of it. After Mom's visit to Denver last winter, on that drive to the airport, she said something like, "I'm glad you didn't get sick of me." Never. Why would you say that? She went on to explain that after she'd been home in Chicago for a few days from school, Catherine, her mother, would say she was ready for my mom to go back to school, saying she was too much. I told my mom then and repeated it in writing on a card I sent when she was home. That was a mean thing to say. How dare she? If I'd been your friend back then, I'd have stuck my tongue out at your mother, told her as much, linked elbows with you, and marched you right out of that house. We both had slim smiles on our faces as we pictured the scenes in our heads, and that's how we have been healing the past. One acknowledgement of a crappy thing at a time, together, both sets of shoulders to deal with it. I'm finding the more I see my mother as a child that had her own dreams smacked down by a clueless adult, or a wide-eyed optimist who had hopes dashed, or a fighter that took computers that were tossed into a school district bin and rebuilt them for the students at her elementary school, and all the rest of the details that make up her life at this point. The deeper I love her, and the more I want to have answers to more questions. If you follow my Insta, then you've seen glimpses of that Chicago trip, but hopefully you've picked up the theme inspired by my oldest, dearest friend, Deb. Do not wait. Do the things, say the things, ask the things, and record the things. If you are able to, sit down with your parents and interview them as though you are a complete stranger from a strange land and ask them, and then record the answers. And if you really have the opportunity, travel with them to their hometown. Start with early childhood, no matter what. What do they remember first? Where did they go to school? How did they get there? What did they wear? Was there recess? What did they do during that time? Jump rope, play kickball, chase the girls, let the conversation flow and make sure they are seen and listened to and loved. Get down to the minutia, like when my mother explained to the Uber driver what a transfer slip was. Recently, my husband and I blew our daughter's mind when we mentioned that we use manual typewriters in college to crank out those term papers. We explained about correcting ribbon and sore fingers from striking keys. The history is in those tiny details. It's hardly a surprise to you when I say right now, I'm going to confess it. This is all shaping into a book, and it's titled Drafting an Obituary. It's part of my mother's stories. It's part of my experiences growing up, and part the journey we've been on to see each other in this broader, richer, meatier way, which has enriched our relationship. I'm no longer allowing other people's takes on my mother to be my opinion of her. I've been asking her questions and realizing those opinions are so 2D, it's pathetic. So back to the book. It's about never being too late to change or heal or hope or realize long ago dreams someone else dashed before you had the muscles to fight for them. I've been adding the graves of my family members to the site Find a Grave, including the only 2 Sneeziks in the world on there thus far. That's another way we can preserve the past for the future curious folks that want to hear the stories. I'm hoping the book will be out sometime in 2025, but I will post pieces of it on my Substack if you're itching to read the early stuff. So now you know the story behind the book I'm working on. It got me wondering about the backstories of other novels. Have you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert? There's one section where she speaks of a writer's relationship with the universe. It's like a channeling. In one download, she received a book idea for an elaborate, interesting plot. She scratched it down and began researching different subjects to better create a loose outline of that novel, but she just couldn't make herself sit down and write it. Well, fast forward a few years, and Elizabeth is at a book fair. She sees an author with a newly published book, reads the back cover, and there is the idea. She knows it wasn't any sort of nefarious idea-stealing crap that led to this moment. It was proof of how the universe works. She had her stab at that idea. She had it first, maybe, and the universe wanted it to exist. And when she took a hard pass on it, the universe fed the idea to another author. Well, that story really struck me, especially when the title for my book about my mother came forward without effort. I have laid claim to it and have committed to taking action on the book every day, so the universe knows not to shop the idea around. Get it, universe? That brings me to the backstory behind Harry Potter. In J.K. Rowling's own words, quote, "For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be an author, and I am at my happiest alone in my writing room making things up. I grew up in a small village on the English-Welsh border and wrote my first story when I was 6 years old about a rabbit called Rabbit. And when I was 11, I wrote my first, quote, novel about 7 cursed diamonds and the people who owned them. I studied French and classics at university and spent a year in Paris as part of my course. A few years later, in 1990, after moving to London, I was sitting on a delayed train back home from Manchester when suddenly I had the idea of a boy wizard who went to wizarding school. Harry Potter and the Hogwarts came out of nowhere in the most physical rush of excitement, and ideas came teeming into my head. I simply knew it was something I would love to write, but that day I was penniless for once in my life. So as I sat there on the train, I had to rely on imagining the details, most of which ended up being in the books. She continues, quote, "From the start, I knew there would be 7 books, and I had the whole story plotted out early on. It took me 5 years to write the first book in the series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Within that time, my mother had died. I had moved to Portugal to teach English, got married, and had my first daughter, Jessica. The marriage didn't work out, and I moved with Jessica and the first 3 chapters of Harry Potter in a suitcase to Edinburgh in Scotland, where my sister lived. There I trained and taught as a French teacher, but continued to write in every spare moment I had, mostly in cafes around the city, while Jessica slept in her pram. Having finished the full manuscript, I sent the first 3 chapters to a number of literary agents, one of whom wrote back asking to see the rest of it. It was honestly the best letter I had ever received in my life," end quote. Here's a great article from Medium written by Chad Grills, who shares the crazy backstories of other famous stories. Number 1, the man's gambling addiction was ruining his life. He couldn't make himself write, and when he didn't write, he became neurotic. Despite his spiraling gambling addiction, he was one hell of a talker. As his gambling debts mounted, he became desperate to get money. He talked his way into getting a book advance from a small publisher, but just like gambling, the terms of the book advance were horrible. The man had just 1 month to produce a masterpiece, or else the publisher would own the rights to everything he wrote for the next 9 years. Without compensation, the man managed to pull himself away from the roulette tables for 26 days and dictated a novel to his secretary. That man was Dostoevsky, and that novel was The Gambler. Number 2. One late night in a daze, she was flipping through the channels on television. It was reality television on one channel and footage of the Iraq War on the other. In this light, she caught a glimpse of what the media had become, one big reality show that glorified war. In that moment, the feeling of separation from her father reemerged. She was no longer watching a reality show, but instead watching a story where she had an emotional connection. As a child, she had felt the torment when her father's number had been called and he had to go to Vietnam. The powerlessness she felt as a child crept back over her as she watched the television. For most people, it was a reality show, but to her, it was reality. But now she was no longer powerless. She had her pen and immense skills that had developed over decades of honing her craft and putting in the work. She didn't have this new idea. It had her. And in a reality television-obsessed culture, the time was right to tell it. At 46 years old, she put pen to paper and wrote her story. A sequel followed, and then it became a trilogy. Within 14 months, 1.5 million copies were in circulation, and the book was taking off. A film adaptation followed. Today, Suzanne Collins has sold over 87 million books. The Hunger Games trilogy is a direct reflection of watching her father go to Vietnam, combined with the reality show-like nature of modern wars. Number 3, the young man was in a downward spiral of drugs and alcohol. He was living in a trailer with his wife, and he was taking enough drugs to kill himself. In a haze, he scribbled out a novel. He was a teacher who had seen one of his students kill herself. She was an outcast who was picked on and bullied. In his novel, he created an alternative reality. In his reality, his student who had been bullied to death not only survived but visited vengeance on her tormentors. The writer finished the novel, but in a drunken stupor, he threw it in the trash. As his life spiraled downwards, his wife helped him pull up the plane just in time. She found the novel in the trash can, took it out, read it, and convinced the writer to submit it to a publisher. That writer, Stephen King, got clean, and the novel from the trash can was Ceri, and it became a breakout success. Also, I have to make a note, Stephen King's phenomenal nonfiction book titled On Writing, in it he shared that after he quit doing drugs and drinking alcohol, he had to relearn how to write. He thought he couldn't do it anymore because it was those addictive substances that shut up the cruel governor in his head and allowed him to tap out the ideas. It would take time, it would take commitment and consistency. Also some blind faith, but he learned how to write all over again, drug and alcohol free. Okay, so on to number 4. Her first novel had never taken off, and it irritated her that it was obviously a memoir. She wanted to write fiction, to create novels and series that spanned generations. She wanted to explore concepts like the nature of space and time, individual and familial redemption. She wanted to explore the potential for human knowledge through fiction, but life and the demands of parenting were overwhelming. She had turned 40 years old and hadn't had the success she wanted with her writing. The small business she owned wasn't making enough money. On New Year's Eve, she was so frustrated by it all that instead of writing, she created just one goal for her year. Her goal was to quit writing. It was too painful. She had new ideas she was developing, but they were stacking up rejection notices. She was busy raising her children. That year, she faced the final battle with her depression, and she triumphed. She finished the year with a novel complete. It was the starting point of an exploration into space, time, and science fiction. She was one of the first women to boldly steer science fiction in a new direction. The most radical part of her novel was that it was presented as a children's story. As she shopped the novel to publishing houses, she continued stacking up those rejection notices. By her count, she had received 40 no's. It wasn't that surprising. After all, the novel explored quantum physics and presented young characters fighting a very real evil. Her book was one of the first science fiction books to present a female protagonist that wasn't a superhero, but rather a realistic girl who used her intellect, science, and faith to save her family. To say these were unnerving ideas for the male-dominated world of publishing would be an understatement. The 40 no's she received were weighing heavily on her, and she gave up and decided to go back to enjoying her life. Her first act of business was to throw her mother a tea party. At the party, she reveled in the delight on her mother's face at all the work she'd put into it. The woman did her best to be present and entertained each of her mother's guests. Late in the day, she met a final guest who hadn't heard that she was a writer. He was a publisher, but unlike the other men she met, he didn't seem threatened by her book idea. Instead, he was intrigued. She decided to let down her guard, and he asked to read a manuscript of her book about space, time, and fighting evil. She agreed, provided him a copy, and the party ended. The days passed, and a new kind of celebration began. The woman received a letter from the publisher that said they'd love to publish the book. Her book was published and began a slow march around the world in 1962. Luckily for us, the woman's goal to quit writing failed miserably. That woman was Madeleine L'Engle, and that book was called A Wrinkle in Time. Barnes & Noble has compiled their own list. Here are a few highlights. Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. Twilight is a book series that will be discussed for decades to come, in part for its cultural impact, no doubt, and the GIFs, in part for the backlash that impact inspired, and in part because Meyer has been pretty candid about the inspiration. A dream. As she writes on her own website, quote, "In my dream, two people were having an intense conversation in a meadow in the woods. One of these people was just your average girl. The other person was fantastically beautiful, sparkly, and a vampire. For what is essentially a transcript of my dream, please see Chapter 13, Confessions." Plenty of writers would kill to have a dream that turns into a best-selling novel series, and it's refreshing to hear a story about inspiration that doesn't hint at any sort of rarefied knowledge of the creative process. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, perhaps the most famous literary origin story of all time. Frankenstein is such a permanent part of pop culture, it's easy to forget just how remarkable the book is. Arguably the first science fiction novel in the modern sense. Shelley was traveling with her future husband, Percy Shelley, and others, including Lord Byron, during 1816, the year without a summer. Bored, the group came up with the idea of trading horror or ghost stories to pass the time. The early 19th century was a giddy time when people thought things like electricity and science, always with the exclamation mark, could do anything, and so Frankenstein's monster was born of a ghost story challenge. Killing Floor by Lee Child. The origins of this mega successful Jack Reacher series are both prosaic and inspiring. At age 40, television producer Lee Child lost his job. Needing a way to generate income and uncertain of what to do with the rest of his life, he decided to write a book. Normally, stories in which people write novels in order to make money end in tragedy. But in Child's case, that novel was Killing Floor, which went on to be a bestseller. And here we are 20 novels later. Child got the name Reacher from a grocery run with his wife when he retrieved a can from a high shelf and she told him he could have a career as a, quote, reacher in stores. Child and his creation, Jack Reacher, are therefore inspirations to all struggling writers and midlife crisis survivors. The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss wrote his most iconic book as a response to the primer books of the age, especially Dick and Jane. These books, while written in a very simple style to help young children learn how to read, suffered from one defect in the opinion of Theodore Geisel. They were boring. He was therefore inspired to write a similar simple book that would engage children but make them want to read, which we are disturbed to discover was apparently a revolutionary idea in the 1950s. Working from a short list of words that the publisher thought every 6-year-old should know and would know, Geisel took the first 2 words that rhymed on the list, and The Cat in the Hat was born. The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. It sounds like a made-up story, but it's true. Tolkien, a professor, was grading papers in his office when he happened on a blank sheet of paper and wrote down a sentence that came to him from out of nowhere. Quote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," end quote. No one apparently was more amazed at the sudden presence of this sentence than Professor Tolkien himself, especially the word hobbit. That sort of inspiration and automatic writing is the sort of thing writers live for. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Most people know the story of the scroll, the sheets of tracing paper taped together on which the first draft of On the Road was written in about 3 weeks' time in 1951. But On the Road wasn't the product of 3 weeks of feverish work. It was the result of years of real-life travels Kerouac undertook with Neil Cassidy and others, driving around the country. Kerouac took notes along the way and worked on several early versions of the novel before having his breakthrough in deciding to write the story as if he were writing a letter to a friend, using the rhythms and improvisational aspects of jazz music as his muse. And then there's all of these from HuffPost. I couldn't resist sharing these ones. Anna Karenina from 1877 by Leo Tolstoy. In January 1872, the death of a 35-year-old woman was reported in the Russian press. Smartly dressed and carrying a bag containing a change of clothes, the girl had thrown herself under a freight train at Yasenki Station outside Moscow. The woman was identified as Anna Pirogova, a distant relative of Leo Tolstoy's wife and the mistress of his good friend and neighbor. It soon transpired that Alexander, his neighbor, had told Anna that he planned to leave her and marry his son's new governess, and unable to cope, she had left him a brief note that said, quote, "You are my murderer. Be happy if an assassin can be happy," and fled. Tolstoy himself attended Anna's postmortem the following day, and by all accounts, the sight of the unrecognizable body of a woman he had known so well stayed with him long afterwards, so that when he came to begin a new novel more than a year later, he already had its tragic conclusion in mind. The Hound of the Baskervilles, 1902, Arthur Conan Doyle. In July 1900, Arthur Conan Doyle met an English journalist named Bertram Fletcher Robinson on board a ship returning to England from the Boer War. The pair quickly became friends, and the following year Doyle agreed to visit Robinson at his home in Devon, in southwest England, with an eye to collaborate on a new novel. Robinson took Doyle up onto Dartmoor, a vast ancient moorland and now a national park, and regaled him with an old folk tale about a notorious local squire named Richard Cabell, who had apparently sold his soul to the devil when he died in 1677. Local legend claims a monstrous pack of jet black hounds descended from the moors to escort his soul into hell. Although Doyle had agreed to co-author a book with Robinson, after putting pen to paper, the story quickly evolved into a new Sherlock Holmes mystery, his first in 8 years, and Robinson's input was relegated, in his own words, to assistant plot producer. Moby Dick, 1851, Herman Melville. Herman Melville's own experiences on board a Pacific Ocean whaling ship in the early 1840s provided the primary inspiration for his novel, Moby Dick, and later editors and commentators have since even been able to draw parallels between Melville's real-life fellow crew members and the characters in his book. That boat was far from his only inspiration, however, as Melville was doubtless also influenced by the true story of a whaling ship named the Essex that was attacked and sunk by a sperm whale in the Central Pacific in 1820. Melville later met the son of one of Essex's 8 surviving crew members during his time on that boat, and after the publication of Moby Dick in 1851, he met with the ship's captain, George Pollard, whom he later described as, quote, one of the most extraordinary men I've ever met. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1886, Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson had already written a play about Deacon Brodie, an 18th century Edinburgh city councillor who led a double life as a burglar, when in 1885 he had a dream about a mild-mannered man transforming into a monster. His wife Fanny later recalled how, in the small hours of one morning, I was awakened by cries of horror from Louis. Thinking he had a nightmare, I awakened him. He said angrily, "Why did you wake me? I was dreaming a fine boogie tale." She had woken him, she later discovered, at what would eventually become Jekyll's first transformation into Mr. Hyde. And a final backstory, probably my all-time favorite book too, To Kill a Mockingbird from 1960, Harper Lee. Harper Lee has long denied claims that To Kill a Mockingbird is an autobiographical work, but rather a reflection of an author simply writing about what he or she knows and has experienced firsthand. Either way, it's hard not to see parallels between her Pulitzer Prize-winning classic and her childhood growing up in Monroeville, Alabama. Just like Scout, Lee's father practiced as a lawyer and in 1919 was faced with defending 2 black men accused of the murder of a local white shopkeeper. Both men, a father and son, were later hanged. Moreover, Lee, like Scout, was a tomboy in her youth, and her eldest brother, Edwin, like Jem, was 4 years her senior. She wrote the book in her years following the death of her mother in 1951, and in the story, Scout too had lost her mother. And even the character of Dill, who lives next door to the Finch family during the summer, is modeled on her childhood friend, Truman Capote, who would spend the summer with his aunt in Alabama while his mother visited New York. Thank you for tuning in to The Curious Cat. Be sure to hang on because after the music is another segment of The Curious Q. Until next week, stay curious. I love you. It's time for the Curious Q, a quick rundown of the week's weirdest headlines. From coast to coast comes this headline: Goblin filmed on farm in Argentina by Tim Benall. An Argentina farm worker captured footage of what appears to be a diminutive bipedal creature that the man claims was a goblin that subsequently attacked him. The alleged encounter reportedly unfolded on Thursday in the community of San Pablo. According to the unnamed witness, the unsettling incident began when the mysterious being emerged from some bushes on the farm, which is when the witness managed to film the eerie interloper. as seen from above, from the vantage point of the tractor the farm worker was operating. The strange sighting took a terrifying turn, the man later claimed, when he exited the vehicle and found himself targeted by the suspected goblin. According to that worker, the creature suddenly fell from the sky and went on the attack, beating him and dragging his body several feet from the vehicle. Looking back on the frightening experience, the shaken man marveled that the goblin possessed inhuman strength. Fortunately, he was saved when one of his co-workers noticed that he had gone missing and, upon looking for him, stumbled upon the downed and unconscious man. Upon being revived, the worker was said to have been hysterical and unable to explain what had just occurred. Adding some credence to the wild account is a series of photos seen on the video that I've linked to in the show notes, showing what appears to be injuries that the man purportedly sustained from the goblin encounter. Since being posted online, this video and shocking story accompanying it has spread like wildfire on social media in Argentina, with many believing the rather fantastic tale. That said, more skeptical viewers argue that the case is merely a clever hoax. With that in mind, what do you make of the weird video and the curious claims surrounding it? Weigh in with your thoughts at the Coast to Coast Facebook page. This next headline comes from Listverse, where they shout out the 10 Hollywood stars that have ditched their cell phones, some as recently as 2021. Smartphones are, by this point, completely ubiquitous in modern society. Everywhere you go, it feels like you need an app to navigate things from digital tickets to gain entry to games and concerts to the ability to read a menu. QR codes, apps, social media accounts, and even the ever-handy GPS are all available at your fingertips. It connects you 24/7 to the world around you. But at what cost? Increasingly, many people are realizing that being forever connected to the rest of the world through your phone isn't necessarily a good thing. And more than a few of those people just so happen to be famous. In this list, we'll look at some celebrities that push back on the smartphone trend. Number 10, Sarah Jessica Parker was incredibly well connected electronically as the 2010s dawned on the world. She had both a cell phone and a very active email account. But then in 2013, she noticed something. She was falling behind on both phone calls and emails. She hated that feeling, the one that felt like she should be more responsive to more people at more times of the day. So she decided to cut out her technological habits, cut them out of her life. And when she examined her lifestyle, the choice became clear. It was time for the cell phone to go. Choosing to retain her BlackBerry specifically so that she could keep up with her many emails she receives from friends and family members, she got rid of her other smartphone and cut out all cell phone use. I chose emails because when you're on a set, you can carefully and sneakily check a BlackBerry, but you can't return a phone call, Parker told E! News when they asked about her decision to ditch the mobile carrier. Hearing your voicemail is full is horrifying to me. Us too, Sarah. Us too, says the author. Number 9, Christopher Walken doesn't just not own a smartphone. He doesn't own any modern digital technology. The famed actor isn't exactly young and vibrant at this point in his life. And when computers and other digital tools came on the rise and began to be adopted by the public in the last couple decades, he was simply too old to jump in like everyone else. So he decided to stay away from cell phones and computers too. According to him, he's never owned a computer in his life, and he doesn't see the need to start now. I just got to it late, Walken explained to Stephen Colbert when the late night host interviewed him about it a few years ago. I think I'm right at a certain age where it just passed me by. I never got too involved in it because it could be strange to have any 10-year-old be much better at it than I am. Honestly, that's not a bad point, especially when it comes to using computers like the way young people do these days. But what about cell phones? Certainly Walken must have have a need to be able to talk on the phone, even a flip phone with producers and directors every now and then, right? Wrong. Cell phones and that sort of thing, it's a little bit like a watch, Walken revealed to Colbert. If you need one, somebody else has got it. People are nice about letting me borrow things. Well, sure, maybe just to make a call, but you can't always count on that. Number 8. When it came time for Dierks Bentley to get a new phone in 2014, he wasn't keen on getting an iPhone like pretty much everybody else in the developed world. So when he went into the Verizon store to pick up his new phone, he specifically asked for the exact opposite. He remembered asking the salesperson there to give him the phone with the absolute lowest level of technology that they had, and that meant a flip phone, even as everybody else in the world was settling into their iPhone-induced existence. Going against the grain indeed. I'm going low-tech, Bentley told People magazine after they asked him about his phone usage. Everybody else was running out for the new iPhone 6, but I got a flip phone. It has a camera because of the kids, but it's pretty much basic. This one was like 99 cents. I'm trying to call more and text less. I don't want to check my phone 5,000 times a day anymore. It was getting to me. I'm bringing the old stuff back. We love the sound of that. Maybe that's a trend we can get behind. Number 7, Justin Bieber. Many of the celebrities on this list have ditched their iPhone or other smartphone brands and opted to use a flip phone instead. But Justin Bieber went even further. He got rid of any cell phone altogether. Now it's not as difficult to do that when you have a manager and a full team of people working around you. We are sure those people still have their smartphones and can communicate and cut deals on Justin's behalf. But still, it's notable that the pop star ditched his phone completely. And this isn't a story from way back when either. Justin opted to make this move in the very recent year of 2021. While explaining that he only personally owns an iPad to be able to send emails every so often whenever he needs to do so, Justin told Billboard magazine that his motivation was making sure that people couldn't constantly contact him asking for favors or help or other perks that have come with his celebrity status. I definitely learned how to have boundaries, and I just don't feel like I owe anybody anything, Bieber explained. That has helped me to be able to say no and just be firm in it, and know that my heart wants to help people, but I can't do everything. I want to sometimes, but it's just not sustainable. Seems like ditching the phone and making it so that he can't receive a phone call or a text message would certainly do the trick. Number 6, Simon Cowell had a smartphone for a long time. He needed one considering his career working in the cutthroat pop music industry. But in 2017, he woke up one morning and realized that all he ever got was hammered with text messages and phone calls. He felt far too reachable and far too connected, and he wanted out. So he let go of his cell phone. Not just that smartphone either. We mean he went entirely without a cell phone altogether. Reflecting on that monumental decision in an interview with E.T., the former American Idol judge explained, "It's very simple. It means you don't wake up to like 50 text messages you cannot reply to." And that's what happened one morning. I woke up and I've got 52 unread messages. And I thought, even if I reply to every one of those, I'm going to get another replying back. And then I'm going to get more that day. So I just turned it off and I went a month, 3 months, and then a year, and then 2 years, then 3 years. And I love it. That is seriously some logic that we can get behind. Must be very mentally freeing. Number 5, Kate Beckinsale is so beautiful that she's allowed to do whatever she wants when it comes to adopting or not adopting technology. Okay, we're half kidding about that part, but she really is beautiful, and she really is old school when it comes to phone use. In 2016, she revealed during an interview with Slash Gear that she still owned a red Verizon LG flip phone. Unlike pretty much every single person around her, Kate wasn't keen on getting an an iPhone for herself. The technological curve was too great, and the digital immersion it offered was just unsettling. That's about the extent of it, she said to the outlet about her flip phone when they asked which tech products she uses in her everyday life. I don't like my iPod. I like a nice record player and a book. I'm very much about that. I'm not much interested in an iPhone. Honestly, after seeing how round-the-clock connectedness has affected so many people in the world around us, we're not much interested in that world anymore either. Perhaps Kate has it right on this one. Number 4, at least Elton John is totally and completely honest about why he doesn't have a smartphone and why he doesn't have any cell phone at all. The legendary crooner is simply too famous to have to worry about all that stuff. Instead of having people call him directly, he simply never bought a cell phone. His assistant has one though, and since his assistant is almost always right there with him and in close contact, that person simply serves as the go-between. Imagine that, being so famous that you don't need to connect yourself to the outside world at all. It's freeing in a way. Now, Elton John does use one piece of technology, an iPad, but he doesn't use it in quite the same way many of us do. He only has it by his side for one single thing, to Skype with his family members when they are far apart. My life is fabulous, Elton explained to late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel about his avoidance of cell phones. I don't have people ringing me 2 times a minute. I couldn't bear to have a phone, and I just have an iPad for the kids and Skyping them when I'm not with them. Honestly, in some ways, that's the dream. Number 3, a decade ago in 2014, actress Shailene Woodley decided to completely ditch her cell phone. Of course, she had an assistant, an agent, and a manager, all of whom were helping her career move along. So she had the privilege to be able to do that. The rest of us can't exactly go no contact with the whole world, even if we wanted to. But regardless, she gave up her smartphone for good. Speaking to the Daily Beast about her unique decision, Woodley said at the time that smartphones have led to a bigger lack of privacy and a bigger lack of camaraderie and community than any invention in history up until that point. She's not wrong. She also told the outlet that if she were ever to buy a phone again, it would be the flip variety. Number 2, you would think that Michael Cera is the ideal person to really fall into the smartphone trend. He came of age just as the iPhone was blowing up. He's incredibly popular both in his movies and online, and he has the world at his fingertips. But he very much doesn't want the world at his fingertips, literally as if he had a smartphone in his hand. And that's because he had a horrible experience with the BlackBerry when it first came out years ago. Cera spoke to the Hollywood Reporter about his strange career, his quirky personality, and his aversion to smartphones. For one, he revealed that he feels a bit of fear about being that connected to the rest of the world because he might really lose control of my waking life. But it goes beyond that too. See, when BlackBerry technology first came out, Cera's best friend bought one immediately. And the next time Michael saw him, they had lunch together, but it didn't go well. Right when people started having smartphones, when it was Blackberries, I had lunch with a friend of mine who was my best friend at the time, he explained. He'd just gotten a Blackberry, and for the whole meal, he was typing emails, and I sat there lonely and bored, so I had an early aversion to them. We can definitely understand how that must have made him feel. Interesting to hear that it turned him off to smartphones forever after, too. Number 1, and finally for all of you pine nuts that might want Chris to like your tweet or TikTok tribute, well, you'll be waiting pretty much forever because this Hollywood snack is about to ditch his iPhone for good. Quote, for many years, he was an advocate of the flip phone. Even long after smartphone technology had been deployed all over the globe, he resisted the urge to use it. That all changed in 2022, though, when he finally bought an iPhone. He wanted to get up to speed with the modern world and all that, but almost immediately, he realized his grave mistake and went right back to using a flip phone as soon as he could. I had a flip phone for 3 or 4 years, and I just got an iPhone because I felt pummeled by how difficult being analog was, Pine explained during a podcast interview a couple years ago. It was very difficult, but having just got this crack machine, the iPhone, it's really bad. These things are really, really, really bad. Lamenting how disorienting it is to have so much information and interconnectedness at his fingertips at every moment, Pine concluded that his soul was hurting the most from using all this modern technology. I may immediately go back to a flip phone. I don't know if I can handle an iPhone. I don't know if my soul can handle it. And our final headline today comes from weirdfresno.com. With spooky season around the corner, I thought it was the perfect appetizer. The headline is The History of Shafter's Green Hotel and Its Ghosts. Michael writes, the Green Hotel, located in Shafter, California, has a rich history dating back to the early 1900s. Originally known as the Shafter Hotel, the building was constructed in 1913 and served as a popular stopover point for travelers along the Southern Pacific Railroad. The hotel was later purchased by the Green family in 1945, who renamed it the Green Hotel, and they operated it as a family-owned business for over a half a century. During its heyday, the Green Hotel was a hub in the small town of Shafter. The hotel's bar and restaurant were popular gathering spots for locals and visitors alike, and the hotel's 32 rooms were almost always occupied. In the 1950s, the hotel even played host to famous guests such as Clark Gable and Carol Lombard, who were traveling through the area. Today, the Green Hotel still stands as a testament to Shafter's rich history. Although the hotel is no longer operational, the building has been beautifully restored and now serves as a popular venue for weddings, events, and photo shoots. The hotel's unique architecture and vintage charm continue to draw visitors from all over California and beyond, and the Green Hotel remains an important landmark in the town of Shafter. Along with its rich history, the Green Hotel in Shafter, California is also rumored to be haunted. There have been several reports of strange occurrences and apparitions within those hotel walls. Some guests have reported feeling a cold presence or hearing unexplained noises, while others have claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in white roaming the halls. Legend has it that the woman in white is the ghost of a former guest who died under mysterious circumstances at the hotel. Others believe that the hotel's bar is haunted by the ghost of a man who was killed in a fight many years ago. Despite these eerie tales, however, the Green Hotel remains a popular destination for those seeking a glimpse into the history of the town, and many visitors still flock to the hotel in hopes of experiencing a supernatural encounter. Thanks for getting weird with me. Catch the headlines next week on The Curious Q. Until then, stay curious and keep it weird.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA. Or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Hotz, spelled HOTES.com.